So you just got yourself a brand new resin printer, but you're not sure where to start. First order of business, make sure you remove all plastic sheets that may be there to protect your screen or FEP film. If left on, these plastic sheets can cause your prints to fail. One of the first things people do is to check their FEP tension. But why? Well, if the FEP is too loose, the cured resin might not separate from the vat. If the FEP is too tight, you risk your print puncturing a hole in the bottom of the vat. The way we check our FEP is by using a sound spectrum analyzer. It is recommended you go to your manufacturer to see what frequency your FEP needs to be tuned to. Once you learn the recommended frequency for your printer's FEP, you are ready to check its tuning. You do this by putting your vat onto its side and lightly drumming on the back of the FEP. Using the sound spectrum analyzer, you can see what range your FEP is tensioned at. If it's too tight, you may want to loosen up the screws. If it is too loose, then you will need to tighten the screws. You may also want to do a screen test. This wonderful test allows you to observe your screen to check for uniformity or dead spots. To easily see defects, cut a sheet of regular printer paper and place it over your screen as you do the exposure test. Warning: wear the provided safety glasses. Direct exposure to UV light can be hazardous to your eyes. Next, you want to check if your build plate is flat. Most build plates are made of aluminum. This soft metal can bend and warp during shipping or may have manufacturing defects. You can check this by taking a straight edge, such as a ruler, across the build plate while shining a light behind it to more easily see these small gaps. If your bed plate is warped, contact the manufacturer and seek support. If the build plate is fine, go ahead and attach it to your machine. Finally, you're going to want to level your build plate. There are two main methods of doing so. The suggested method is the paper method. This method can easily be found on YouTube and your user manual. The second method that many use is called the Flint Read method. You can choose whatever method you feel works best for you. Check the links below to see the two different methods of leveling your build plate. Now that you're set up, you're probably wondering to yourself, what should I print first? Our recommendation is that you print the R.E.R.F. test, otherwise known as a resin exposure rangefinder. But why should I print this first? Not all resins are made the same. There are variations between different companies, and even between different bottles of the same resin. Doing an exposure test each time you open a new bottle of resin will allow you to see the most optimal settings needed for successful prints. The settings of your resin exposure is dependent on ambient temperature, the printer itself, and brand of resin being used. Also, even if you have two different bottles of resin from the same company, there may be differences in consistency, which will also affect your exposure times. The R.E.R.F. allows you to find the ideal settings for your machine, resin, and environment with minimal print time and cleanup required. Because parts of the exposure test will fail, you should also strain and clean your vat after doing this test. It is important to empty your vat through a filter every time you have a print failure to avoid potentially ruining future prints or worse, cracking your LCD screen when you start your next print. The exposure test is no exception. Now that you have checked to make sure everything is installed correctly, leveled, and your resin settings are optimized, you are now ready to start your adventure into 3D printing. If you want to learn more about support settings, we highly recommend you watch 3D Printing Pro. The link for his channel will be down below. If you enjoyed this video and like to see more, subscribe to this channel and follow us on Facebook. Until next time, good printing!